Why, hello. My name is George Weatherford, and I am so excited to be here with you today. I am so grateful that curiosity got the best of you, and here you are to spend a little time with me and hopefully to learn a little bit more about a series of workshops I will be offering in January or early next year. These workshops bring together some very important parts of my life and experiences and work. Particularly, they bring together uh, trauma responsive care and new thought, spirituality, and philosophy. I have found through the years that these two really support each other and have really helped me in my life. I have been a practitioner for Centers for Spiritual Living in the New Thought field for 10 years. I also have a master's degree in education from the Peaceable Schools program, where I learned a lot of social emotional learning. I was able to begin my awareness of diversity, equity, inclusion, and the effects of bias and racism and historical trauma on human development and the development of the brain. I also currently work full time for a social services nonprofit here in Portland, Oregon, where I am a trainer, a coach, and a consultant in a trauma responsive model. So this really is my world. It really is my work. And I really have found that these parts feed each other and support each other in ways that really help my personal growth and also help my experiences that came from trauma and stress in my own life. Hopefully, this will be the same for you. I call this series Trauma Informed Spirituality, Building Cultures of Care. It is really focused on building trauma informed technique and awareness to support our spiritual growth and also to support building communities and cultures of support, particularly in our spiritual communities, that we use this trauma informed approach to create trauma informed cultures that support our human development in a way that really supports our spiritual development. It is really rooted in what to me is a belief in two truths living at the same time. I have heard that we are spiritual beings living a human experience. I love that. I agree with that. Where once this meant to me, however, that my belief uh, in the oneness of all life, in energy that connects all of us and is all that is, uh, where once I believed that those higher principles kind of stood outside of my human experience and that I should aim for those and kind of not look at the pain and the hurt of my life. In recent years, I've been going the other direction, and I've been telling myself that if I truly believe in this principle of oneness, that's really the root of New Thought spirituality, that my experience is the spiritual experience. And by leaning into it, not by telling stories over and over again that recreate more of my experience, but if I look for the spiritual in my experience and open myself to the fullness of what I am living, that there is a greater spirituality going on in my life. And I am able to have a higher understanding of my world and create a better world, and also really be clear on what my spiritual work is to do. I bring up the idea of the creative process in all of this, which really is sort of a connection between these two truths. In the New Thought tradition that I practice, we talk about our thoughts and our beliefs being like seeds that create our reality, that manifest in our lives. And the the task generally is to plant seeds that have higher beliefs, that really show our belief in oneness, that show our belief in infinite intelligence and in unconditional love, which is great. What I've come to learn as well, that I don't think people would argue, is that the creative process happens anyway in our lives, and it happens in our human experience. That the behaviors and the interactions of our lives, sometimes especially the challenging ones, can come from challenging thoughts and beliefs, which are rooted in challenging experiences and in trauma and inequity. And I think it's important to know this and remember this for two reasons. One is that trauma has an effect on our brain, that we can go back to our trauma, we can relive our trauma outside of our conscious thought. It can just be a flashback or a sight or a sound. And our brain responds to it as if it were happening. It's important to understand this because when we are in that space, it can be very hard when we're living in fight or flight, when we're living seeing threat, to plant a new seed. I think that sometimes we need to kind of soothe the soil. We need to work with ourselves a little bit so that our brains feel safer and that our neural pathways are moving away from the fight or flight and into the higher functions, so that we can create a new seed and new fruit, like more appealing lives, more of what we want to see. The other side of the creative process in this is, I think in our communities, it's really important to remember this, to give each other grace and to work with each other on a human level. Interactions in churches and spiritual communities can be fraught and can be challenging because we are human beings trying to grow together. And I think sometimes it's really important to remember that we're seeing annoying behaviors, but that these annoying behaviors came from somewhere, and to just love people. And part of changing our neural pathways is the safety that comes when we can love somebody, even with that awareness that this behavior is challenging, but we understand that it came from somewhere and that we need to give some grace and some time. I want to mention a little bit the spiritual idea that in this process of new thoughts, of planting new seeds, that we often talk about turning away from the conditions in our life. I get that, turning away from the story and the sob stories that tend to reseed and give us more of the same. And I think it's important to remember again that when our brain goes into fight or flight, it takes about half the time for that to kick in that it takes to use our higher executive brain, to be using our critical thought. When we are traumatized over and over again, we see threat everywhere, as I said. And the response to that makes it very hard to turn away from conditions until we retrain our brains, until we make our bodies and our brains feel safer, so that we can then have different thoughts, plant different seeds. Also, I think it's important to realize that turning away from conditions can be a very privileged request when we are talking to people who experience racism and bias based on what they look like and what they show up as every single day. When you walk out the door or turn on the TV and this bias hits you in the face, it can be really hard and annoying and unfair to hear turn away from that, turn away from the conditions, believe something else. Sometimes part of the spiritual process is calling out the inequity and trying to do something about that as well. So when I talk about trauma, just to give you a little bit of understanding for this part, I'm talking about not events that happen to us, but our ability to cope. In this quote from Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who is an expert in the field, he says that really when the combination of our internal resources and our external supports are not enough to weigh stronger than the events, that's trauma. I share this because the work that we will do is a lot about building our internal resources and external supports, and doing that in a way that our mental health supports then the building of internal resources and continual growth of external supports in our spiritual lives and in our spiritual work and communities. So with that in mind, we will be looking a lot at how the brain works in anxiety, stress, and trauma. We'll be looking a little bit about the roles that we have played that have kept us safe in the past that don't work for us anymore, but that we do tend to go back to when we have similar situations to old ones. The feeling victimized, or feeling like a rescuer, like we got to go in and fix it, or that, I'm going to go in and I'm going to change this and be the persecutor. These reenactments, these roles, really keep us out of a creator consciousness, in an understanding of what we can control, and in rooting in that, in the belief that we do have the power in our lives. And they also undermine those external supports. When we put people in roles, from our past, it really undermines the community interactions that help us grow. We'll be looking at courageous self-care that goes beyond meditation, but also into things like calling out inequity, to being flexible in our roles, to speaking out, and to creating boundaries and strong boundaries in our communities. We sometimes are loath to do that, and those are just as helpful for our self-care as some of the spiritual techniques and the mindfulness. And speaking of mindfulness, we'll really be working on tools of regulating our feelings and regulating our emotions so that we are in a proper place to create new thoughts. We have rerouted our neural pathways away from the fight or flight over and over again, seeing threat, to being able to think critically and be able to actually create stories and beliefs and ideas in our life that are new thoughts that can then create those seeds that bear fruit. We'll be looking and building culture of shared values, shared language, shared practice, and shared knowledge. And this will include in a spiritual realm. It'll also include in areas of understanding the brain, of healing from trauma and stress, of working together, having courageous conversations, dealing with adversity and conflict in our communities. So this building of a culture of care exists on a spiritual level and on a trauma-sensitive level. In a nutshell, this is what we'll be looking at and working through and seeing how it shows up for each of us. Again, I'm really excited because this bringing together has really helped my spiritual process. It has helped me deal with my own trauma and my own reenactments. in a way that really sets the stage for stronger spiritual growth. And I would say more satisfying spiritual growth, because it's not just about trying to create something out there, but really to enrich and find ways to be stronger with what goes on my day to day, and even the challenges in my day to day life. Really look forward to seeing you there. Hope you can bring community. Hope you can bring spiritual leaders who might have ideas of how to support your community and your culture. We will have three 2-hour sessions in January. And again, I really look forward to seeing you there. I'm really excited to be doing this, and I think that we will learn a lot together. So thanks so much and have a great night.